Have you ever wondered why you sometimes ruin the very things you swear you want? Why just when life begins to soften, when the chaos quiets, when someone finally treats you with the gentleness you always hoped for, something inside you tightens instead of relaxes? It's a strange kind of tension, the kind that arrives in the moments that should feel safe, as if peace itself is a warning, as if calm is only the silence before an old storm returns. Most people think sabotage looks dramatic, but more often it's subtle. It slips in through hesitation, through second guesses, through the sudden urge to pull away right when things begin to go well. You tell yourself you're being cautious, or realistic, or simply not ready. But beneath those explanations lies a deeper truth. The nervous system doesn't chase what feels good, it chases what feels familiar. And for many of us, familiarity was never soft. It was unpredictable. It was conditional. It was loud in ways we learned to brace for, and quiet in ways we learned to fear. So as adults, we flinch at stability. We question kindness. We run from opportunities that would reshape our lives, because on some level, safety feels suspicious. Calm feels like a setup. Happiness feels fragile, almost dangerous. This isn't weakness, and it isn't failure. It's a pattern written long before you had the words to describe it. To understand why you might pull away from peace, or why part of you longs for healing while another part resists it, we have to look beneath the surface, not at your mistakes, but at your wiring. Not at what's wrong with you, but at what happened to you. Because sabotage isn't the beginning of your story, it's the echo of one. To understand the roots of self-sabotage, you have to step back into the earliest environment that shaped you, long before you could articulate fear, or name discomfort, or question what love was supposed to feel like. Because sabotage never begins in adulthood. It begins in the quiet, formative moments when your nervous system was still learning how the world works. The truth is simple and unsettling. The brain does not naturally seek what is good for you. It seeks what is predictable. It chooses the familiar over the healthy every time. Safety, for the developing mind, is not defined by softness or warmth. Safety is defined by repetition. Whatever you experience consistently, whether it was affection, volatility, silence, pressure, or fear, became the blueprint your body now uses to interpret the world. Imagine a child learning to walk in a room scattered with broken glass. Every step teaches a lesson. Move carefully, expect pain, prepare for the next cut. The child does not internalize hope. They internalize caution. They learn that forward motion is dangerous, that the ground must be scanned before every step, that stillness is safer than progress. And long after the glass is gone, long after the room changes, those lessons remain. For many people, childhood was not a dramatic disaster. It was subtler than that. It was the quiet tension of waiting for someone's mood to shift, the unpredictability of affection, the sudden coldness after warmth, the unspoken rule that love had to be earned, or that peace never lasted long enough to trust. You learned to read the room like a map, scanning for emotional weather changes before they arrived. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, absorbs these early rhythms. It calibrates itself not to danger, but to unpredictability. When comfort is inconsistent, the amygdala does not relax. It prepares, it fires, even in calm moments, whispering that stillness is suspicious, that quiet is the beginning of noise, that any moment of peace is simply a pause before impact. This is how anxious attachment begins, not as a flaw or a choice, but as a survival adaptation. The child learns that closeness brings uncertainty, that affection can disappear without warning, that calm does not guarantee safety. And so, as an adult, you do not just fear abandonment. You fear trusting the moments that should feel safe. Your mind grows older, but your nervous system stays young. It keeps following the only pattern it ever knew. And in that pattern, peace is not comfort. Peace is risk. The story does not end with the childhood environment that shaped you. Because even when you grow older and move into new places, even when you build a life far from the room where the tension once lived, the body carries the memory of the past like a silent archive. It is often said that the body remembers what the mind forgets, and nowhere is this more evident than in the way we respond to calm. You may not consciously recall the moments that taught you to brace yourself, but your nervous system does. A certain tone of voice, a shift in someone's expression, a sudden quiet at the end of a long day can stir something inside you that you cannot name. Your breathing changes, your muscles tighten. You sense a familiar threat that does not exist in the room but still exists inside your wiring. This is emotional conditioning. The body reacts before thought. The reaction is not logical and not chosen. It is automatic. A gesture of kindness can make your chest ache. A warm silence can feel like a trap. A stable relationship can make you restless, not because anything is wrong, but because your nervous system was trained to expect instability. This training continues through a principle neuroscience calls predictive coding. The brain constantly tries to forecast the future based on what it has already lived. If your early world was unpredictable, the brain assumes the next moment will be the same. It waits for disappointment. It expects withdrawal. It believes that love will shift without warning, and so it prepares for that shift before it ever happens. When your inner world carries these predictions, even good things feel strangely out of place. This is emotional incongruence, the quiet conflict between what your life provides and what your body believes is safe. When life becomes calm, the nervous system sounds an alarm, not because danger is present, but because danger was once predictable. So you flinch not at pain, but at peace. You question the very things that are meant to support you. You resist comfort because the body mistrusts its softness. This is not self-sabotage in the way people often imagine. It is the echo of an old survival strategy, a pattern your body mastered long before you had the words to explain it. And though the circumstances have changed, the body continues to follow the script it learned long ago. Even though the roots of these patterns are planted in childhood, they do not remain private memories. The world around you often reinforces them in ways that are subtle but powerful. If the home taught you to brace yourself, society teaches you to perfect the performance. It tells you that strength means silence, that goodness means self-sacrifice, and that worth is earned through exhaustion. In many ways, society praises the very behaviors that keep you small. The person who never asks for help is admired. The person who works through pain is applauded. The person who puts everyone else first is celebrated as noble. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin to align your identity with what others reward, even when those rewards come at the cost of your own well-being. This is where toxic altruism settles in, the quiet belief that your value comes from how much you can give away. Every time you ignore your limits, someone calls you dedicated. Every time you hide your sadness, someone calls you strong. Every time you say yes while your body is pleading for rest, someone praises your kindness, and the praise itself becomes addictive. What most people do not understand is that the brain is vulnerable to this kind of validation. Social approval releases dopamine, the very chemical associated with reward and motivation. This means that the world can literally train you to abandon yourself. The more people applaud your self-neglect, the more your brain learns to associate suffering with purpose. This creates a loop that is very difficult to break. Burnout begins to feel like achievement, overgiving begins to feel like identity, boundaries begin to feel like betrayal. You are encouraged to take pride in the very habits that drain you, and shame grows in the moment you try to step away from them. And so the pattern deepens. What began as survival becomes self-image. What began as caution becomes character. You become fluent in the art of disappearing for others, and the world smiles at your ability to endure. Yet beneath the praise and the silence, something in you grows tired. A quiet part of you begins to ask a question that society never taught you to ask. What if the life that earns applause is the same life that empties you? That question is the first sign that the old pattern is beginning to crack. There comes a point when the habits you learned in childhood and the praise you received from the world begin to merge into something heavier. The survival patterns become personality traits. The caution becomes instinct. The restraint becomes identity. And slowly, almost silently, you begin to build a mask. This mask looks like strength from the outside. It looks like control, composure, reliability. People admire how steady you seem. They comment on your calm presence, your emotional discipline, your ability to carry weight without collapsing. What they cannot see is that the mask is not a symbol of peace. It is a shield. It was built to keep others from getting too close, and built to keep you from feeling too much. Over time, you become so skilled at wearing it that even you start to believe it. You convince yourself that the moments when you pull away are logical decisions, that the distance you create is wisdom, that the walls you built are boundaries, even though they were never meant to protect your growth. They were meant to protect your fear. This is where self-confirmation bias takes hold. The mind begins to recreate the feelings it has known the longest. If love once felt unpredictable, stability now feels strange. If chaos once kept you alert, calm now feels unreal. If affection once disappeared, you prepare for loss before it arrives. Without intending to, you begin to seek out the very patterns that hurt you because they are the only ones your nervous system recognizes. You may start a conflict when something good begins. You may withdraw right as a relationship deepens. You may sabotage progress just when a breakthrough is near. These actions are not conscious rebellion. They are anticipatory defenses. You ruin the moment before it can ruin you. You choose distance before distance can choose you. You break things in advance so you can feel in control of the ending. The tragedy is not that you do these things. The tragedy is that they once protected you, and your nervous system has not yet learned that the people and places that taught you fear are no longer here. This mask, once necessary, begins to imprison you. It keeps praise on the outside and emptiness on the inside. It protects you from vulnerability while also preventing connection. And the deeper truth is simple. You cannot heal behind armor. At some point, the mask must crack for the person beneath it to finally breathe. There comes a moment when the mask becomes so familiar that taking it off feels more frightening than keeping it on. You have survived for so long by anticipating every disappointment, by preparing for every fracture, by stepping back before anything can collapse. And somewhere along the way, this pattern stops feeling like a reaction. It starts feeling like identity. Psychologists call this learned helplessness. But in daily life, it feels less like a theory and more like a slow, quiet surrender. You stop believing that anything will change. You tell yourself that chaos is normal, that loss is expected, that closeness always ends the same way. The pattern becomes the story your mind repeats, a story that says you can endure anything but cannot escape yourself. This creates a particular kind of exhaustion. It is not the exhaustion of a long day or a heavy week. It is the exhaustion of living a double life. On the surface, you look put together. You offer advice you cannot follow. You speak of healing you cannot feel. You appear strong while something deep inside you bends under the weight of unspoken fear. It becomes difficult to trust your own progress. Each time you try to change, the old pattern pulls you back like gravity. A small setback becomes confirmation that you were foolish to hope. A moment of doubt becomes proof that nothing inside you is capable of shifting, and soon the fear you once carried becomes the only truth you know how to believe. This is the cage, not made of walls, but of expectations. Expectations that were formed long before you could challenge them. Expectations that convince you that sabotage is destiny rather than conditioning. Expectations that whisper the same message again and again. You will fall because you always have. But the very moment you grow tired of this message, the pattern begins to weaken. Because exhaustion can be a turning point. When the old story finally becomes unbearable, a quiet part of you begins to question whether it was ever your story to begin with. And that question is the first small crack in the cage. When the old story begins to crack, even just slightly, something new becomes possible. Not a dramatic rebirth, not an overnight transformation, but a quiet shift in direction. Healing rarely arrives the way people imagine it. It does not come with loud revelations or sudden clarity. More often, it enters like dawn, slowly, softly, almost unnoticed. It begins the moment you stop running from yourself. The most important truth is this: your brain is not fixed. Your patterns are not permanent. The body that once learned to survive chaos can also learn to rest in peace. Neuroscience calls this neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to rewire itself through repetition. What was once instinct can be reshaped. What was once fear can be relearned as safety. But this requires a kind of gentleness most of us were never taught. You do not heal by forcing yourself into calm. You heal by teaching your nervous system that calm is not a threat. And this teaching happens in small, almost invisible moments. The moment you take a breath instead of reacting. The moment you sit with discomfort instead of fleeing from it. The moment you write down a feeling you once tried to bury. The moment you say no even though your voice shakes. The moment you rest without asking permission. These choices seem small, almost insignificant, yet they carry enormous weight. Each one is a new message to the body. A message that says the danger has passed. A message that says presence can be safe. A message that says you no longer have to live on alert. This is the beginning of reparenting. The process of giving yourself the steadiness you never received. It is not a punishment. It is protection. It is choosing to guide your own nervous system with the consistency it once lacked. And slowly, your inner world responds. The alarm quiets. The muscles loosen. The mind stops scanning the room for storms that no longer exist. You will not change all at once. You will relapse. You will slip back into familiar patterns. But each time you return to awareness, each time you choose not to abandon yourself, the old wiring weakens. You may feel as if you are walking in circles, but you are rising, the way a spiral staircase lifts you even when the steps seem repetitive. One day, without effort, you will notice that silence no longer feels dangerous, that calm no longer feels suspicious, that peace no longer feels like waiting for something to go wrong. And in that moment, you will realize something profound. The person you have been fearing all this time is not the world. It is the version of yourself that no longer needs to run. There comes a day when something inside you shifts, not with fanfare, not with an announcement, but with a quiet sense of recognition. You notice a moment that would have frightened you in the past, yet this time, your breath stays steady. A familiar trigger appears, and instead of spiraling, you remain present. You hear the old voice that once told you to run, but now it feels like an echo rather than a command. This is the moment the pattern begins to break. At first, the change feels strange. You are stepping into a version of yourself that your nervous system has never met. You begin to sense a kind of calm that does not feel like a warning. You start to realize that safety is not an illusion. It is not a trick. It is an experience your body is finally learning to trust. What once felt uncomfortable now feels possible. What once felt threatening now feels gentle. This is the beginning of your new self. It does not erase your past. It grows from it. The lessons you learned in chaos do not disappear. They transform. They become awareness instead of fear. They become clarity instead of panic. They become wisdom instead of wounds. This is where the phoenix metaphor finds its truth. People often imagine the phoenix as a creature that dies dramatically and rises even more dramatically, but the real beauty of the myth is something quieter. The phoenix does not fear the fire. It walks into the flame with understanding. It knows the burning is not destruction. It is cleansing. It is release. It is the shedding of what no longer serves the life that waits beyond the smoke. You have been doing the same without realizing it. Every moment you faced a fear instead of avoiding it was a step into your fire. Every time you chose honesty over performance, stillness over running, presence over panic, you were burning away the parts of yourself that were built for survival, but not for living. Psychology calls this post-traumatic growth, the ability of the mind to rebuild identity from the very place that once felt like ruin. It is not a simple process. It is not a straight line. But it reveals something powerful. The very experiences that once hurt you become the foundation of your strength. And one day, you look at yourself and see not the person shaped by fear, but the person shaped by their own rising. You realize that the ashes on your hands were never proof of destruction. They were evidence of becoming. You are not who you were. And for the first time, that truth no longer scares you. When you reach this point in your journey, a quiet truth begins to rise within you. The question that once haunted you, the one that whispered "what is wrong with me," begins to dissolve. In its place, a new question forms, softer and far more honest. What happened to me, and what is possible for me now? It is a shift so small, the world may not notice it, yet it changes everything. You begin to understand that the patterns you called failure were not signs of weakness. They were signs of adaptation. You survived in the only ways you knew. You protected yourself with the tools you had. And now that your life has room for something different, you finally have the chance to choose a new direction. Your past no longer dictates your future. It informs it, it strengthens it. The nervous system that once feared peace can learn to rest. The mind that once expected loss can learn to welcome connection. The heart that once braced for impact can learn to open without shaking. This is not a fantasy. It is the natural progression of a body that is learning safety one moment at a time. And so you stand at the threshold of your own becoming, not as someone who must earn worthiness, but as someone who has always been worthy, not as someone escaping their past, but as someone growing beyond it. You are not failing to transform. You are finally returning to yourself.